right, so really big week for us, preparation, going to play a really talented, well-coached team in a really challenging place to play, always, especially at night. So I think our guys are excited for the challenge, coming off of last week's road game. And so got a lot of work to do, a lot of things to improve on, especially offensively. And obviously talked about it last night, but really felt really good about 2 of the 3 phases Saturday. And, our goal is to play a complete game this week.
Questions?
Lane, I know it's through 6 games now, and probably a question that could have been asked a couple weeks ago, but how do y'all kind of start having those redshirt conversations with players after you've kind of reached that 4th game of the season?
Yeah, that's really challenging nowadays with the different landscape. I know a lot of coaches, there's a lot of frustration with that, and I think a number of coaches even making a push for, it's just 5 years total, so you can get out of this. A player's playing, and then, they just decide, not to play after 4 games in the season. So there's no perfect answer. At the end of the day, it's their choice. So you just got to work around it. It's just kind of, I think, falls into that category of just the way it's been done for a while now that should be revisited and say, okay, does this really make a lot of sense?
Lane, I know we asked you about it.
And I think on that too, why I say does it make a lot of sense? I'm not just saying from our side as coaches, from a player side, that's hard on them too. Because do I keep playing or do I get another year, especially when now you get paid, for another year of playing here or somewhere else, and so then I can not play, save myself a year of salary, a lot of times somewhere else in situations. So I think it really puts both sides in a tough situation. Sorry.
We asked you about it before, but obviously last win was the 100th in your career. Have you had any time to reflect on that now that you're a few days out from that?
It's not that I haven't had time. I just really, I don't know that there's much that matters there to do, and that's kind of falls into more outcomes of things versus process, and just maintaining to work really hard and try to prepare our team. So there's a lot of challenges within that, especially in this conference. This is, you saw last week, this is a really deep, hard conference, and much like the NFL, and that's not like that around the country most places. So I know that's kind of off on that, but I don't think you have much time to think about much else besides continuing to get your team, try to get them better all year round, and to play really well and prepare really well, because this is a really challenging conference.
Take questions up top. Lane, Jackson said after the South Carolina game that they had, player-led meetings and whatnot to kind of get back on track, and obviously the way they got back on track was very impressive Saturday. From kind of like a leadership standpoint, do you think that this team, how does this team's leadership at the top kind of compare to others since you've been here?
Not to diminish player-led meetings, but, people have player-led meetings all around the country all the time, and then you just really don't hear much about them when they lose again. And then when they win, they're like, man, we had a player-led team meeting, so that's why we won, but so a lot of times it happens and you lose. So I do think that we have a lot of guys that really care about the team, and so that loss was really hurtful to them. And so I think more than really player-led teaming as much, I think it was more them just getting around each other. And I think it kind of helped them too. It was like a traumatic, day, because they didn't think they were going to lose and expect to lose. The game, was in hand to where if they just, go down to score, make it 2 scores. And so I just think that it was hard to deal with, and I think they helped each other through that. you know, having similar pain at the time.
And Brian Kelly was very honest at media days about last year's game, that huge win for y'all. He basically said that game knocked LSU out of the playoffs and that Ole Miss forced our hand to evaluate our defense, and subsequently we made changes on that side of the ball. That game became the mark of where we can't go again. Then obviously they got a new defensive coordinator. I guess, what do you kind of think of those comments from that game, and do you expect LSU and those who played in that to have an extra chip on their shoulder this Saturday?
I don't know that. They got a new staff and over there, and Brian does a great job. I think he's all-time active winningest college coach, and you got to make hard changes, to be a successful head coach, and I'm sure that was challenging for him, but you got to do what's in the best interest of the team. But every year's independent, every game's independent of every other game, so I don't know that there's much relative to last year, because I think, as you see in college football, you can't even say what's relative a week ago, how somebody plays and how they play against this team, and then the next week that's going to matter, and then it doesn't matter at all. So I think every week's always independent, every season's independent, and I don't know why it feels even more than ever that you better get your team motivated and right each week, or you're gonna lose.
Lane, following up on John's question, what are the challenges that LSU brings to the table for you this week?
Like all LSU teams, regardless of who the head coach is, they're extremely talented, great-looking players, really explosive on offense. I think Nussmeier is really talented, really good release. So, you got really good players that you got to go play against, and it's been that case for a long time.
What's the latest status update on Trey Harris?
We don't, as you guys know, we don't really get into much detail on that. He couldn't finish the first half and wasn't really close to going back in the second half. And he certainly wouldn't be playing today. So, we got to get the other guys ready. We got to perform better than we did in the second half without him. We only had 3 points. Now, we only threw one pass in the fourth quarter. But, that makes us move people in different spots when he's out. So we're preparing to do that and preparing to play without him.
Did the secondary perform better Saturday, or was South Carolina just not very good throwing the ball?
No disrespect, but I think it's in the middle there, both. I think they would tell you that they missed some guys and guy catches the third down and falls down. So, but we did play better. We made way less mistakes. We've been making all these penalty mistakes, which were critical. We had one that would have been an interception, but we had a lot less than we had been. So we did definitely play better.
Coach, when you turned on the film, what is your assessment of your offensive line play this past Saturday?
Up and down. I think just like we talked about, the play of the DBs, and does it have to do with the opponent? I think in this case, some up and down is because those also have two really elite college defensive ends. The freshman, the guy looks like he's going to be a top 10 pick, 3 years when he can go out. And they give you a unique scheme. They're kind of big, little in how they play. They rush so up the field and move so much inside that they create negative plays. So we certainly could have played better up front, but credit to them for doing a really good job on that end too.
What are your experiences in Death Valley?
COVID, and we should have won, and we didn't. We won in Alabama down there and played sloppy, and then won in overtime with a rub route. And then we took the lead, 2 years ago, early, and actually speaking of double moves from this week, had a double move with Mingo open to extend the lead, missed that, and then kind of, didn't play well after that. And I think too that was like Jaden's coming out. I don't think people really realized how good he was, and he kind of had been hit and miss how he'd been playing coming into that game. And he throws a ball where we should pick it and we don't, and they score on it. And then after that, he kind of started taking off and becoming the elite player that he is. So those are kind of my memories.
At the halfway point of the season, just what's kind of your overall assessment of the running back room or ground game, and how do you feel about the running back room this week?
I think they were beat up coming into the game, both of them, and but protected well, and so we're going to continue to look at people and continue to look at that and find the best ways to win.
So Terrion Perkins was named the SEC Defensive Player of the Week. He admitted last year was a little bit up and down for him, but is this the guy we're seeing now, the guy you thought you were getting when you recruited him a couple years ago?
Yeah, I think it's hard as a true freshman to be an impact player, and especially when you're kind of learning a new position that, it's not like he just had this, he played running back, linebacker, now he's in this kind of hybrid, kind of like their Perkins did when he was young. So that's challenging, and I think now he's more playing one spot, and he's really productive and a really good player and an awesome kid.
Up top. Obviously, you definitely don't ever want to lose a game. But do you think that sometimes a loss can be good for a team to help them refocus and reset for the rest of the season?
I think in loss and games in life, like you figure out a lot about yourself and what, whether it's yourself or whether it's as a team. And so, yeah, I think they can be very defining. And they can go both ways. Again, they don't always work and go the one way. They can spiral. So, and again, you guys that have been here, like, I don't overreact, like when a game's a one-score game and say, well, man, we were really ready and the players did a great job. And then you're like, well, if they would have made the kick, you would have lost. So both ways, just like I don't in a loss, just like I don't in a win. But I do look at that game as like, yes, they react right. Yes, they learned something about themselves because they pretty much dominated the game on the road in the SEC. So that's a lot of people doing things right and the right mentality.
All right, any other questions for Coach? All right, thanks, everyone.
All right, thanks.